Hello, Book 2. I am now at the end of this Lord of the Rings-esque trilogy by Stephen R. Donaldson, The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, and I just finished the last book, The Power That Preserves. And I gotta say, I think this was definitely the best of the trilogy. Actually, this was the only one I didn't have mixed feelings on. I genuinely just liked it. Now, so I think that this is like I'm not the first person to. Donaldson has this really good ability to deliver cinematic conclusions in all of his books, and usually it's the last part of his books are the best. Like, not just in the sense that everything comes together, but there's just like something at the pacing and the way he writes really kind of makes you think of a movie, the way it unfolds. And I think that this third book, which is the conclusion of the whole trilogy, you get that the strongest because it's like reading the end of his one of his books, so it's the entire thing. I think that so it makes sense that the third book in this trilogy will be the best because it is the conclusion of the whole thing, not just the individual conclusion of a particular book. And I thought the conclusion of this book, like the last part of it, was nearly perfect because of the way it dealt with Thomas Covenant's character flaws and how they actually empowered him. I thought like I was reading it, I actually sat like I sped through the ending, and I was just sitting back and thinking, reflecting on it, and I thought it was like ingeniously constructed the way he dealt with all of his character flaws. He resolved them in different ways, and he has this conclusion that's not perfect for Thomas Covenant, but I think it was extremely fitting. However, there was one choice in this last part that I thought when it first happened, I thought it was forced, and then something happened later on that just made it redundant. And I won't say I can't spoil what it is, but that was the one thing I kept thinking that kept the conclusion from being perfect. It was nearly perfect to the conclusion of it, but the last part was I didn't understand why he had put it in there. Anyway, so I have complained a little bit that the books have been very slow paced, which is not something I normally complain about. I just feel like in this series, when that time is spent with kind of lackluster character development, a lot of info developing and traveling, which I don't think is good base for a slow paced book, then it's not good. But in this case, it's not slow paced at all, at least relatively. It's relatively fast paced. There really isn't any part of the book I could say that was especially slow paced or info about too much or had too much traveling. It was very tight and concise. And I'm hoping actually that I'm not sure when I'll read them, probably not for a long time. That this improvement in his writing quality actually carries over to the next books in the trilogy and the series because it's a 10-book series. Although maybe this one book was the height of the series, I don't really know. It also does not remember in my review of the Iller Four when I mentioned there was this one scene in book 2 that actually brought down the whole book for me, and like I might even get it 4 stars, or at least 3.5 stars, but that one scene ruined it for me. There is no scene like that in book 3, and it doesn't continue the awful handling of that subject matter. So I can say that it's like well behind it, and I also don't think that occurs again. At least I haven't heard in the second trilogy. So that gives me more hope for reading future books in the series. Albeit I'm not sure if I want to go that far yet. Oh yeah, and if I hadn't mentioned before, it's a 10-book series, but the first trilogy is self-contained, and so is the second trilogy. So you don't actually have to read all 10 of them, like say like at a Wheel of Time or long series like that. But you are able to. Like the conclusion of this trilogy, it's totally satisfying enough so you don't have to read more if you don't want to. But they also left little slivers of things that could be the basis for a sequel. I can see. The writing is still very beautiful. However, like in my Broken Empire review, I have to admit I think that the style of writing actually I think got me worn out, and by the third entry, like in Broken Empire, the series I thought was beautifully written at first, and I still do for a lot of it. But by the third book, I thought it'd become very overdone and predictable. Just like in this one, like Donaldson uses way too many similes. Like, and it's like he'll use like oftentimes like them in, like a lot of them in succession, and it just like every time I saw like or as, I kind of it was just too much. I mean, it wasn't terrible. Overall, I'd say the writing is so beautiful, but so far as prose goes, the writing is definitely the weakest in this entry compared to the other ones. Speaking of prose, I've actually come to appreciate it a bit more of late. I think I already liked it, but I'm realizing is that it's definitely not perfect. But I think that like Donaldson, he devotes a lot of time that like he probably devotes the same amount of time that other authors devote to describing like scenery and battles, things like that. He devotes just as much time and writes in the same way as people's emotions, and I think that's really interesting. It's not always well done. A lot of times it's overdone and exaggerated and kind of angsty. But I actually really do respect that. He puts a lot of effort into it. And overall, even with it not being as good writing as the previous entries, it is still very good writing. But again, it's more to my taste with a lot of the really obscure words and lots of detailed descriptions and stuff that I know not everyone likes. Anyway, also, probably one of my main criticisms of the series is still here, unfortunately. The characters, other than Thomas Covenant, the characters are generally pretty underdeveloped. I like how Thomas Covenant went to the end of his arc in this one, and actually, generally, I think this book probably made me like Thomas Covenant the most of all three of them. But the characters in general are still pretty underdeveloped. They're very generic, one note. That does not mean I can't always root for them, though. Like, some of them, though, are likable enough so that you can still root for them, even though they're a pretty basic character. I think one of my favorite scenes in this book was with one of the characters who was honestly pretty generic, but I just like the passion in it and his zero likability just made me like it. He's like a last stand moment. Anyway, my overall rating for this book is a 4 out of 5 stars. I think this definitely really redeemed the series. I already liked the series well enough, but I had mixed feelings about it. But as you know, the previous two reviews, I get 3 stars. This one is a solid 4 stars. It's not perfect, and it's still lacking in areas, but I think it was easily my favorite of the trilogy. And this is the one I think I can generally say that I just basically enjoyed reading. Like the other ones, I was mixed throughout. I wasn't entirely sure. There were parts I liked, parts I disliked. This one I just generally enjoyed reading, and there wasn't anything in there. There was definitely nothing in there bad enough to make me dislike, like say there was a really big complaint. Anyway, thank you for listening. Make sure to please the YouTube algorithm gods by liking and commenting, and have a nice day.